Hello and welcome to this Thursday's morning market briefing. We've got lots to talk about, but firstly, Nikki Haley ends White House bid but does not endorse Donald Trump. As well as that, 2 people are killed in a Houthi attack on a cargo ship off the Yemeni coast. We've got lots to talk about on the charts also, with lots happening on the economic calendar, but we'll come to that near the end, so make sure you stay around so you can see that. Before we get straight into it though, make sure you subscribe. The first article to talk about is on the topic of Nikki Haley. Now, Nikki Haley has now ended her White House bid and ended her campaign for president, dropping out of the Republican primaries. This follows months of campaigning in the Republican primaries and taking on a great deal of donations. Now, we've been talking about Nikki Haley a lot recently, and that is largely because, now 2 days ago on Tuesday, we did have the Super Tuesday primary day. This is the day where many primaries from across the United States fall onto the same day, and therefore it is very significant for whoever's running in the primaries to see where they're at basically. And as we've now seen from the results on Super Tuesday this year, it does make it very clear often, who will be the nominee for whoever party you're talking about basically. And here, of course, we are talking about the Republican Party, and the 2 candidates that were going head to head were Nikki Haley and Donald Trump, with Donald Trump obviously being the massive favorite basically, due to him being far more well known and him also having that very strong follower base. And so in all the polls leading up to the Republican primaries, Nikki Haley wasn't even in the second position even. That was back when Ron DeSantis was actually running for in these Republican primaries. He was the person that we would often see in second place, and then Vivek Ramaswamy was obviously often challenging Nikki Haley for that 4th position. But what we did end up seeing as the Republican primaries did progress is Nikki Haley start working her way up those ranks. We did start to see other Republican primary candidates start dropping out, such as Vivek Ramaswamy. He endorsed Trump. Then we saw, of course, Ron DeSantis also drop out, and he also endorsed Donald Trump. So what we really were seeing, apart from Chris Christie, was all of these primary candidates, all these Republican primary candidates were dropping out and then endorsing Trump. And so it was really an uphill battle here for Nikki Haley, and so some started to speculate whether she was mainly doing this so she'd be more well known and be the favourite candidate in the 2028 Republican presidential nominee process. So that's the kind of key thing to note in regards to the lead up to this. And on Super Tuesday, as I've just spoken about, that is the day this week. Pardon me, I'm not talking properly, but ultimately Super Tuesday this year did result in a very resounding defeat for Nikki Haley and a very strong win for Donald Trump, with Nikki Haley only winning 1 state on Super Tuesday, and that's a state, a day where many states vote. And so this kind of made it clear that Donald Trump was absolutely going to win this Republican primary, and therefore now it does seem like Nikki Haley has thrown in the towel and kind of given up. A surprising kind of element to this though is, Nikki Haley did have quite a bit of financial support. We know that she was able to find large donors on Wall Street, and therefore she was able to fund her campaign greatly, and we saw a great deal of ad spending taking place during this primary season. Interestingly though, I think definitely the result not yesterday, but I believe the day before or the day before that, but very recently, of course, we did get the courts the Supreme Court ruling that it was not constitutional for Colorado to take Donald Trump off the primary ballot, and that's what led Nikki Haley, in my opinion, to realize that there wasn't a chance in winning this, because the key thing was that if Donald Trump was taken off the Republican primary ballot, Nikki Haley would basically be the only person that could actually take up the reins there, and take on the position of the Republican nominee, because if Trump's name couldn't exist on the Colorado ballot, then he wouldn't then be able to, of course, be within that primary. But also, it would allow other states to also take Donald Trump's name off the ballot based on his involvement in the January 6th insurrection. So that was the key thing. But obviously, with the Supreme Court unanimously ruling that, Donald Trump's name couldn't be taken off the ballot, Nikki Haley was ultimately not going to win this battle, and just didn't have the numbers to back her, despite winning 2 states within this primary. Now, she announced her decision in a brief speech back in South Carolina, which is her home state, just a day after Super Tuesday, where Trump beat her in all but one primary contest. Her final remarks included her stating that she has zero regrets on her decision to campaign for a Republican presidential nominee, and she also congratulated Trump on his victory whilst choosing not to endorse Trump for the presidential election. I think that's a very interesting point to note, and I think that's going to create a very interesting image going into the Trump versus Biden battle that we're now undoubtedly going to see in 2024. And Nikki Haley not endorsing Trump is very important, because we know that Nikki Haley's supporter base did include many more moderate types, even some voters which voted for Biden in 2020, certain voters that maybe are Republican but ultimately dislike Trump enough to vote Democrat should Trump stay in the position of Republican leader, basically, as head of the GOP. So that's why we really kind of that's why we are in a very interesting position here for the Republican primary. Pardon me, I'm getting muddled up on my words. Ultimately, this is very interesting because we do now have a situation where Nikki Haley's votes, whilst they were much including a much smaller minority within the Republican Party, we could definitely see those voters move over to the Biden base, and therefore cost Donald Trump the election, as we did see polls actually put Nikki Haley often above Donald Trump in let's say her battling against Biden than when we might see Donald Trump battling Biden, if that makes sense. Now, instead, Haley called on Trump to now win over her voters, which she said should make up their own mind on the matter. Haley stepping down also triggered the Senator Mitch McConnell to endorse Trump, and we know there's been a feud between those two before, which makes that kind of very interesting to see. Haley's performance in the primaries was surprising, with Haley going on to beat the polls, gain huge sums of money in donations, but ultimately failed to win more than 2 states. Haley's exit effectively crowns Trump as the 2024 Republican presidential nominee, meaning the 2024 presidential election will be a repeated battle between Trump and Biden. Trump currently has a 2% lead in polls over Biden, with an 8-month race ahead of them. So that's the key thing. He only has that 2% lead in polls. So if we do see, all of Nikki Haley's supporter base, or most of it, going over to the Biden base, we could definitely see some worrying polls for Trump. Definitely keep your eyes on this article, though. Very important for the elections this year in the US, but also just to understand politics and how that might affect markets. That's all to talk about in this article, though. Next article to talk about is to do with the Houthis and in relation to world tensions. Now, yesterday, the first fatalities occurred since the start of the Houthi attacks on commercial ships. This follows the Houthis attacking a Barbados-flagged dry bulk carrier in the Gulf of Aden, leaving 2 mariners dead. Now, this, of course, is a very significant article to talk about, and a very significant event, because ultimately, we did see the Houthis start attacking commercial vessels following the October the 7th attack by Hamas into Israeli territory, where we then did see a lot of hostages be taken and many civilians killed. And since then, we've obviously seen the Israeli response into Gaza, where an air, land and sea operation has basically taken place to take and occupy Gaza. So a great deal of world tensions has obviously risen from that event, and this is kind of one of the kind of butterfly effects, I guess you might say, which is proving very significant for the world economy, since we've seen the Houthis attack these commercial vessels and basically shut down the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden as a shipping route, forcing many shipping companies to go around the Cape, the entirety of Africa, rather than just cutting through and into the Mediterranean. So this is a very significant kind of article to talk about, as ultimately it kind of highlights the levels of danger within the Gulf of Aden, and possibly even and might even possibly cause further escalations to do with the US and Britain, which we know have been striking Houthi targets within Yemen. Now, yesterday, the first fatalities occurred since the start of the Houthi attacks on commercial ships. This comes following the Houthis attacking a Barbados-flagged dry bulk carrier. The Houthis have attacked more than 40 ships since November. Yet up until now, no serious injuries to the mariners have been reported, with the most serious damage to the commercial vessels up to this point being the sinking of the bulk carrier Ruby Mar. But of course we do know that all of those sailors on board that ship were able to kind of exit safely and evacuate. So that's why we didn't see as much escalation kind of come from that event as we might now see from this event, where we are seeing fatalities be reported. Now, after the attack was reported, the Houthis immediately claimed responsibility, calling the ship manned by the two mariners an American ship. And we do know the Houthis are specifically targeting American Western ships, of course, due to their kind of stated involvement in Israel's operations into Gaza. Now, a statement by the ship's manager said that the crew included 15 Filipinos, 4 Vietnamese, as well as 1 Indian, with 2 Sri Lankans and 1 Nepalese working as security guards. The ship was taking steel and trucks from China to Saudi Arabia. Unconfirmed reports also suggest that the death toll of the attack may still rise. The ship at the time was flying the flag of Barbados, with the Houthis previously attacking the ships they describe as Israeli, British or American, with the Houthis seemingly attacking it since the ship's previous ownership was under one of the most active US private equity firms in the shipping industry. So that is seemingly why the Houthis did attack it, because they did have that out-of-date information that the ship was still owned by a US company, and therefore they kind of saw it as an American ship. What we could now see come from this in the fallout, though, is very worrying indeed, and could definitely cause certain safe haven assets to continue a move to the upside. And most definitely for assets like oil, we could definitely see that take a rise as well. But as we'll come to in the charts in just a moment, we'll analyze those positions and situations for those assets. That's all to talk about on the articles, though. We've covered lots on there and lots to talk about now on the charts. Sorry, I'm very tired today. Now, firstly, to talk about, though, is the US 30, where we are seeing a great deal happen, and it does seem like a great deal of volatility did enter the markets yesterday following Jerome Powell's testimony in Capitol. I believe it was in the Capitol Hill building, Congress, but ultimately we did see Jerome Powell, in his testimony yesterday, and there he was talking about his kind of conduct, of course, and the Fed's position ultimately. So, keeping that transparency, key, which is key, of course, within government. So ultimately, we did see Jerome Powell make some interesting comments about the Fed's position, about inflation, and about employment. And that seemingly has created that volatility that we were just talking about, and did cause price to spike up from this lower level of liquidity and push all the way to the upside, tapping that 61.80. Since then, we have seen price move off to the downside, and we could definitely now be expecting price to move all the way to the downside and reach the level of minus 27.2. As when price usually does break below these trend lines, like this bullish trend line that we do have noted out here, when price then does come into contact with some area of liquidity that will allow it to move higher, we do see price often come back into contact with that trend line that was acting as support, and this time it will act as resistance, and seemingly price has reacted to it as a resistance kind of zone, as well as reacting to that 61.80, and as a result we've seen that kind of bearish volume kind of enter the market as a result of that. So we could definitely be looking at that minus 27.2% as the next level for price. That's all to talk about on US indices though. Keep your eyes on that, as we are getting a lot of US data this week, which will be definitely influencing US equities. So keep your eyes on all of that. Next to talk about though is the dollar. So still on top of the US, and of course, with Jerome Powell's comments today, we have seen the dollar sell off to the downside. So it does seem like the markets are actually taking a more kind of dovish picture on Jerome Powell's comments rather than hawkish picture, and that's kind of despite certain investors taking away from the testimony that rates are going to stay where they are for a while, which is kind of what we were already expecting. We're expecting rate cuts maybe in May, but ultimately rate levels should stay the same for this month and next month. So that's something that's important to note. But Jerome Powell obviously did make some interesting comments on inflation, saying inflation has decreased significantly, but it's still not at those target levels, so take that as you will. And ultimately price is now in a very interesting area after breaking below this key area of liquidity. So we could definitely see now price swing up to the upside and reconnect with that, retest that, and then continue to the downside. So keep your eyes on the dollar. Next to talk about is Euro USD, which mirroring the dollar, basically mirroring the inverse of the dollar, obviously has continued to the upside, pushing away from this area of liquidity that was kind of acting as an area of resistance for the euro, and is now broken above this kind of range high that we noted before. So that's something that's important to note. Maybe this is just slippage though, and price could slip back below, but ultimately keep your eyes on these key liquidity levels, as the next level to really note above this range high is this key area of liquidity that we have noted up here, which has acted as a key area of resistance, but also accumulation distribution before. So keep your eyes on Euro USD. Next to talk about though is pound yen, which has sold off from this double top that we did see form on Monday, basically when price did kind of come up and test this area of liquidity. So it wasn't quite a double top, but in the way that there was an area of liquidity created at the previous high, it kind of still acted as a double top, and it seems like price has sold off from that area. I just want to draw out quickly a Fibonacci retracement tool to basically look out for those levels which price might interact with and then continue higher, as that is something that we have been seeing repeated on pound yen, as we did see price here come into contact with a 61.80 and then continue to the upside. I believe it was a 61.80, it may have been another retracement level, but we then did also see price come into contact with this 61.80 and liquidity zone not too long ago before we saw this swing to the upside. That said, price didn't break those all-time highs, those recent highs, so maybe we're seeing a reversal take place. So always think about that, but definitely keep your eyes on this 61.80, which it seems like price has already interacted with and reacted to. But yeah, keep your eyes on these key Fibonacci levels. Next to talk about though is Bitcoin. Bitcoin obviously has been incredibly volatile recently, and yesterday we did see price obviously interact, the day before yesterday, sorry, we did see price interact with this 50% retracement level, Fibonacci retracement level and liquidity zone. And yesterday we saw this continuation to the upside from that level, as price had finished that retracement and is now moving to the upside. We are seeing a bit of stagnation though now, so definitely keep your eyes on Bitcoin, as it could now roll off to the downside. We have seen price now break those all-time highs, so possibly it's exhausted all of that kind of upward momentum, as on the RSI we have clearly formed a bearish divergence, which kind of explains this sell-off, but also could hint towards further moves to the downside, so keep that on your mind. Next to talk about though is gold, which is just continuing to push the upside and has now broken all-time highs. This black line here basically provides us some context to where the all-time highs are for gold, and as you can see here, gold has now wicked above that all-time high level. So very key moves for gold, and a great deal of bullish momentum recently. Price has moved significantly to the upside, and just moving away from this area of liquidity that we had noted, price has moved a full 5%. So crazy moves for gold. Keep your eyes on it nonetheless. Lastly to talk about though is oil, which obviously as a result of the news from the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden with those two sailors dead, we have seen price swing to the upside, but we are now seeing a bit of a move to the downside as well. So keep your eyes on oil. Lots of volatility likely coming to oil, with some escalation being possible within the Middle East. So keep your eyes on all of that. That's all to talk about on the charts. So lastly to talk about is the economic calendar, where we've got lots to note, of course. Now firstly, we are getting Aussie and Chinese balance of trade figures, as well as the Swiss unemployment rate figure, followed by the ECB's interest rate decision and press conference. Followed by that, we're getting the US and Canadian balance of trade figure, as well as the US jobless claims data, as well as the some US jobless claims data. As well as that, we're having the ECB President Lagarde doing a speech today, followed by Jerome Powell's testimony once again, and then numerous Fed official speeches as well as the Japanese household spending figure. So lots of data to note today, lots to listen out for, and lots to look out for on the charts as well. We've got lots in the articles, lots in the charts, and lots in the economic calendar. Hope you have a great trading day, but that's all from us at Wildwood Capital. Have a great one. See you later. Bye.